So I was the opposite of driven. I was too afraid to try in my early life. But I made myself a promise standing there in the dark that I was going to start trying and never stop trying no matter how much it hurt. So I chose to do the really hard thing that nobody else wanted to do. Instead of getting in line behind 35 other people, there was an open lane and I could step right up to the counter if I was willing to do the job nobody wanted to do.
Scott, welcome to the Point of Impact. So glad to have you here.
It's really good to be here, man. Really good to be here.
I tell you what, I've been doing my homework on this and studying up on it, doing my internet stalking, all that. And I'm so excited to talk to you because you've got just a wild and really interesting story in the music industry and going I don't know, from, was it like volunteer roadie to...
Stowaway
you tell the story.
Maybe a better word. Yeah.
But anyhow, not to start with just blunt force questioning, but all the success you found from becoming an entrepreneur, working with the artists that you have, becoming the music artist yourself. If there was one word that would define the reason for your success, what would you say? I would say it would be
free beer. Oh, wait, that's two words. No, it would be tenacious. It would be tenacious. Ooh. Yeah.
Tenacious. Tenacity. Were you always so driven? Or was there some kind of a pivot point in your life?
Oh, absolutely. There was a pivot point. I just released a book called Tenacious, and it talks about how being tenacious and tenacity has made all the difference in my life. And to set the stage a little more, I have 17 guests. Most of them are household names that wrote a little bit in the book. People like Brad Paisley and Peter Frampton, and they all agreed that tenacity was the difference maker in their lives as well. I wrote this book not from the point of view of being the most tenacious person ever, but to your point, perhaps the most improved. When I was a young man, I found myself unable to try. When I would try and do my homework, I would end up crying. I would end up a mess. And I didn't know why. And I graduated barely from high school and went on to flunk out of college. And right after flunking out of college, or really as I was flunking out of college, I went to see a psychiatrist, had a breakthrough with him. He said, Scott, you have such a pronounced fear of failure. It would be easier for you to grab a hot stove and hang on and maim yourself than to actually try. And that diagnosis was powerful for me. So I was the opposite of driven. I was too afraid to try in my early life.
Okay. So once you had this epiphany, was it just was easy road from there, or?
Yeah, no, not for me. It might have been for somebody, but yeah, I realized I had this fear, which was powerful. And I was waiting tables at a Howard Johnson's on the side of the highway, which was not my dream job, nor was I particularly good at it. I don't have the short-term memory to be a great waiter. But luckily, an incredible looking tour bus pulled in with the space shuttle on the side of it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I bet these guys work for NASA or something. So I asked if they could be seated in my section, and they were. And I watched them get off the bus. And to my disappointment, they were wearing all black and had long hair. And I thought, they don't look like they work for NASA.
You never know.
I got their drink orders and I asked them, so what's the deal with the bus? And in a thick Irish accent, one of them said, we work for the band U2. Now, to give you some perspective, the Joshua Tree album had just been released and people were calling them the biggest thing since the Beatles. It was a huge moment in music where an artist just blew up. And music was the place I was hiding while I was living in this less than perfect life. And music had always been so important to me. I went back to the kitchen with my mind just racing. And finally I came back out and said, I don't understand. What do you mean you work for the band U2? Like, I would have thought you had to be Bono's cousin to do that. I don't understand. And the guy at the table laughed and said, well, Scott, 7 of us are the very best in the world at what we do. We put on the lights in the show. And clearly he was being a little sarcastic. And then he puts his arm around the guy next to him and says, and this is AJ. He's Bono's cousin. And so everybody laughed. And I had a million questions. And in asking all those questions, finally they said, like, all right, we got to go. Why don't you just come to the next show and we'll answer more questions? I accepted their invitation and asked a million more questions at their show the next day, which was 3 hours away. But the lights dropped. The house went wild, just 15,000 screaming fans. And I stood there in the dark and I had a paradigm shift. This is what I was going to do with my life. I loved music. I loved technology. I loved travel. Oh my gosh. I was going to see the world with U2. Well, my joy quickly evaporated as I realized that to do any of this, I was going to have to try. And none of that had been working out very well for me. But I made myself a promise standing there in the dark that I was going to start trying and never stop trying, no matter how much it hurt. So it did hurt. It was very hard for me to get over my fear. And I would say power through my fear. But I spent, I did some crazy things. You alluded to one of them, so I'll go ahead and say it. I quit my 3 jobs, dropped out of school, which it's sort of like quitting the moment you're about to be fired. I mean, I had 0 credits 2 semesters in, so I was on my way out anyway. And, hopped in my car, sold my Super Sport Camaro, hopped in my other car and lived in it and spent 5 weeks sneaking into U2 shows, not to see the show. I would sneak in after the show and work for free, loading the show out, and then drive to the next city and do it again and again. And I lived in my car for 5 weeks doing that and became something of a mascot to some of the guys, the crew on the tour, and almost got arrested 3 times sneaking in. I caught pneumonia working outside in the rain and not having anywhere to hide. Almost fell asleep driving from city to city more times than I can count. But did some crazy things to work towards that dream. And it didn't work out. Surprise, U2 didn't hire the kid that was nuts and following him around. But they were very kind to me and gave me some advice. I followed it. And I worked for a couple of years doing corporate video, trying to learn the technology and trying desperately to be in the right place at the right time. And lo and behold, 2.5, 3 years later, the Rolling Stones hired me. And it wasn't U2, but it was pretty darn close. And some would say a better band. Depends on who you ask, right? And I spent the next year traveling the world with the Rolling Stones. And that journey is where my tenacity was born. So no, I definitely wasn't born with it. And there was quite a struggle for me to get to the point where I was willing to fail.
Well, you said learn how to try, but you didn't just try. That was like being afraid of the deep end and just jumping in. And then trying to find somebody around to say, hey, teach me how to do this while like doggy paddling or something. You dropped out of college. By the way, where are you from?
Upstate New York. I was going to be an electrical engineer. I was going to go to RPI. I was doing my first 2 years at Hudson Valley,
okay,
which was a community college to save money. And that was my plan, and I was simply unable to execute on that plan.
Yeah, I had a similar plan. It was a mutual thing. I was at Bowling Green State University in Ohio, and it was a mutual. I was invited to leave after about as many credits after 3 semesters. Anyhow, my path led me to the military.
I like that. Yeah, they were about to invite me to leave as well, I'm sure.
So you quit your jobs, college, and start chasing you two across the country and volunteering to work. What were you doing for them? Like,
the really simple stuff every tour has touring technicians that understand the technology, but in every city, they bring in stagehands to do the heavy lifting and moving and that sort of thing. So I was learning the proper way to coil a cable. Hey kid, this cable's 100 feet long. Coil it up and put it in this box. 10 seconds in, they're like, whoa, not like that. That's going to be a tangled mess when we get to the other city. Like, here's how you properly coil a cable. It goes in this box. All right, close the box. That's not how you latch the box. Here's how you latch the box. Like the really simple stuff, but the basics, right? And, but mostly I was learning how the show flowed, how one department would do one thing to get out of another department's way. It was more of the big picture stuff. So I was learning the minutia and the big picture. And I think the biggest thing I was learning was that I liked it. I do like this. I love the idea. This is hard work, but I'm not afraid of hard work. And I'm learning something. And if these guys do their job right, 15,000 people scream. And that felt really rewarding to me, that I could be a part of music and play some little role in these people having such a good time. They screamed out loud.
So how did you get from that to corporate videos in DC?
Yeah. One of the guys, one of the really fun things about writing the book was, you want to get it right, but it was 30 something years ago. So I started finding these guys, and one of the guys who was really helpful to me was Lawrence Anderson, and I found him and we've reconnected, and I'm so grateful for that. But Lawrence said, what do you want to do? And this was right at the end when management had found out about me and they were afraid I was going to fall asleep driving from city to city. So nobody was mad at me, but they were afraid that I was going to kill myself, in a car wreck and that it would be their fault. So they were like, you can't do this anymore. And then Lawrence said, what do you want to do? A couple of them said, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to do video. And Lawrence had heard of this brand new video projector. Video was brand new to the industry, by the way. No concerts had video screens at this point. Two of them, like U2 had it and Journey had it, and that's it. And so I thought, well, I should do the brand new thing. If I'm going to get on an industry, I want to get on the brand new industry. So I won't have a 30-step ladder to climb. I'll be on the bottom step of a 2-rung ladder, right? It's brand new. So I went and learned this video projector, which was an absolute nightmare. But I finagled my way into General Electric and had them train me on how to use the projector. And before I even finished my week-long training, a company in DC hired me. They were like, oh yeah, we need people that know how to do this thing. And so I spent 2 years doing stuff I didn't love. Good company, but I didn't want to be in a ballroom talking about software and, hitting play on videos that showed people why the new Oracle software would help them control their client lists. But that's what I was doing. I wanted to be in the middle of the, 15,000 screaming fans, but, that was my path. If I had to learn, I had to be valuable. I realized that they pick up their guys that coil cables and latch cases. They pick those up in every city. I wanted to be the guy that understood the technology. So I spent 2 years in DC, learned a whole bunch, and just worked at being in the right place at the right time, and finally was, and managed to get myself hired by the Rolling Stones.
It definitely seems drab after the concert world. But were there any other takeaways, any other lessons learned, or things that you gathered from your time in DC?
Yeah. Going back to how hard it was, there were times where my self-doubt would just overflow and I would go hide somewhere and cry and then get that out of my system and then come back to the job site and try and finish working. But I learned a ton about the technology, and that was my inroad, right? Learning these projectors. And so I know that's a very specific statement, but for your listeners, sometimes there's an inroad to your dream And in my case, it was the thing that nobody else wanted to do because it was so hard. And it was hard because the projectors broke all the time. And nobody wants that, especially the kid who's afraid of failing. But if that's my way in, then I guess that's what I'll have to do. So I chose to do the really hard thing that nobody else wanted to do. And that was that made it an open lane for me. Instead of getting in line behind 35 other people, there was an open lane and I could step right up to the counter if I was willing to do the job nobody wanted to do.
It sounds like one of those bold letter things that the professor I didn't pay attention to puts up on the board. You do the hard stuff. Nobody else is willing to.
Yeah. Yeah. And, hey, if there's an easier path for you, great. But there didn't seem to be one for me. And there's really something to be said for the kid who's so afraid of failing that he can't make himself try. When he finally starts trying, literally goes for the thing that will fail, that will make him a failure. And it did on several occasions. They would just blow up and it was really hard, but it might have been just what I needed, right? Because if you're afraid of failing, the thing you need most is you need to learn how to fail better. And you need to learn that failure is not a brick wall. Failure is not death. Failure is not the end. Failure is a stepping stone. Failure is where you learn everything. When you do it right, you might learn something. When you do it wrong, you learn more things. That's really what those 3 years gave me more than anything. Was I learned that failure wasn't death. I reinforced it. Like you can tell someone that, like I just told you that, and you can say, yep, I believe that. But if it's wired in your head that it is, good luck just getting out there and trying. It's just hard. What I did was I repeatedly overrode the hard wiring in my brain, overcame it, and got myself out of that rut. And I so frequently chose another path that braver path, if you will, more reasonable path, started to become the rut. It actually became the road more traveled. And when I would start to do something, my wagon wheel would fall into the rut of let's try instead of the rut of like, oh no, I can't try.
Mm-hmm. I was also going to say deliberate cognitive dissonance. I know this is going to be for a good purpose. So whatever I do is going to be worth it in the end. I'm going to ignore all the bad stuff. But when did the Rolling Stones come along? When did this opportunity happen?
I fought really hard. A few of us did for us to get music at this company because we wanted to do it. There was a salesman who used to be, as I recall, Kool and the Gang's monitor engineer. And he managed to sell a music tour. And so we got hired by this thing that I thought was called Budfest, but I can't line it up. So I know it was a festival and I know it was all rap because I was not a rap fan. And our first show was in Atlanta and I didn't know any of the people performing. And we showed up to this stadium to do video. And I was so ecstatic to just be bringing music to people. And we did a horrible job. We were terrible. We didn't have the best projectors. We had really bad tube cameras that require a great deal of light. And here we were with this show with all these dark flesh tones with not that much light. And our image looked terrible. And I was just dying. I mean, I wanted to give these people the best show ever. And I wanted to be in music so bad. And here I was, my first music show in a year and a half. And so at one point someone came up to me and said, man, are you with the video? And I'm like, yeah. And he said, you should just turn it off. And I'm like, he wasn't wrong. So we come out of that. We have a meeting about all the things that we learned because we failed. Mm-hmm. We learned so much. And here's how we're going to get better. And we just need to convince management to buy these things. And we're going to get better at this. And we're going to make sure they have more spotlights. And right after we got out of that meeting, the client called and fired us. And I went, okay. So I pulled a page out of my old playbook. I asked if I could have a long weekend off since I had been allocated to be on the job site on Friday loading in. I asked if I could have the weekend off since they didn't have work for me, and I wanted to go home and see my parents in New York. But what I didn't tell them is that I really was going to go to the next stadium for the show, and I was going to sneak in, and I was going to figure out what the other company was doing and how they were doing it better than us. And so it's one thing to sneak in as a kid who is dropping out of college and all this. It's another thing to be 2 years older and be the guy who just got fired sneaking into the rap stadium show. But I did it, and I didn't get caught, and I didn't get arrested, and I figured out who was in charge. And I went up to him and said, man, this is all really cool. And mind you, I'm only at this point 20 years old. I got long hair. I don't look like I'm a threat, right? I look a little weird, but I don't look like a threat. And he told me all about what he did. And I learned, sure enough, we really didn't have the right stuff. And as we were talking, he said something that bothered me a little bit, and he pressed me on who I was, which he hadn't really asked. And when I revealed that I worked for the competitor that had lost the job, he got mad because I'd been picking his brain. So he and I are yelling at each other, and a third guy comes up and says, whoa, what's going on here? And without missing the beat, I go, I'm screaming at this guy because I'm frustrated with my life. And the other guy laughs and goes and just shakes his head at me and turns and walks away like, you're not worth my time. And the guy who split us up goes, well, that's a funny answer. Tell me more about that. And I really hit it off with this guy, and we got talking, and finally I was like, look, I got to go. And I told him how frustrated I was and what I was trying to do. And when I finished all that, as I was walking away, he said, Scott, I just got hired by the Rolling Stones to do all the video projectors. I'd really like to talk to you about it. And I was like, whoa. And that's how I got my in. I mean, it was a 3-hour interview, but they chose me. And my 21st birthday was my going away party for the next 13 months for me to be on the road all over the world with the Rolling Stones. I made it. And it was amazing.
That's incredible. You imagine if you hadn't done something so brazen as a person who used to be afraid to try. You're sneaking in. Actually, by this time, you're an old hand at sneaking into concerts. But to actually go up to the competition, that got hired over your firing, and to pick his brain. That's pretty incredible.
In hindsight, it's a little nuts. I've heard real heroes say that, people call them brave, and I heard one of them say, you can say I was brave, but I was at a point where I just almost didn't care anymore because it was so bad. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. He could have just said, yep, I'm brave. And he said, nah. And so I think there was a little bit of that there for me. And that I know I'm not encouraging your listeners to go get their life to so rock bottom that they don't care anymore. But that helped me, right? So I don't want more credit than I deserve. There was a little bit of the, man, everything's at rock bottom anyway going on. But, what I would say is that I was so terrified to move. And once I did start moving, brave, or you choose the degree of bravery, everything felt different. I went from being the kid who failed in an instant. I went from being the kid who's failing out of school and ashamed of himself. And an instant later, I took a step towards a dream. And an instant later, I stopped being the kid who failed, and I became the kid who was trying. I might have been 1,000 steps away from the goal I wanted, but I was no longer the kid who failed. I was the kid who was trying. And that's really what I think anybody can draw upon, those lessons, and just take a step towards whatever your dream is. You don't have to be at rock bottom, but I was. And I was brave. I did some crazy things. I definitely did. But I also was pretty desperate. I was really down.
No, the good thing about rock bottom is that there's only one direction to go. You can't fall any further. But you mentioned shame, and having been in the military and actually worked been able to work with some people I consider heroes. There's something I don't think a whole lot of people consider, is that sometimes we're not brave because we're just inherently courageous. Sometimes it's that fear of shame, or that discomfort with shame. We don't want to put ourselves, or even more important, the people around me down. We don't want to disappoint them. So we step up because we don't want to be ashamed of not, doing what we have to.
Yeah, because you're a part of something and you want to. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I wouldn't characterize mine as that, but I love that you shared that and were vulnerable about that, because I don't know if you've had a chance to read the book yet. Probably not, because it did just come out. But Jason Hendo Henderson is my guest in chapters 9 and 10, who is a Navy SEAL. And I believe it made the final cut. I had to trim all the interviews down quite a bit. Some of them would have been their own book, because they just had so much to say. But he mentioned shame. He did not want to, he never wanted to quit. He never wanted to back away from anything, because he did not want to be ashamed in front of the other guys, or even early in life for his dad or his friends. And yeah, it's interesting. And I guess it's true for me too, because I was ashamed of who I was. And that was new to me. As a kid, you think you're going to set the world on fire and everything's going to be great. You never think about living a life that, you're not happy with, because, you're just doing your thing. You're on the playground. Like, it is what it is. It's what your childhood should be. And then, for most of us, and then you hit 19 and you're flunking out of college and you start to go, oh no, my life is going to be something less. And yeah, I was truly ashamed. And so, yeah, that is a good motivator, I suppose. But I'm grateful for things like that. I'm grateful for the shame I felt, if it's what gets me out of my rut and gets me going to where I'm proud. Any motivator and anything that hurts, I tend to look back on the things that hurt me the most with some gratitude in my life, because they're the things that have shaped me.
Absolutely right. And they're great reminders of the mistakes you made last time, so you don't have to do those again. The more it hurts, the better the lesson. There's a lot of information in pain if we're willing to learn. What did you learn about Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones while working with them?
Yeah, I think the thing that surprised me about Mick Jagger is that he is, I would best describe him as the CEO of the Rolling Stones. You think he's a rock star and he's doing his drugs and he's got all these women around and whatever, you would imagine a rock star is doing. Man, he was incredibly together. He was a well-oiled machine. He would get up and run 6 miles. He'd put a hoodie on and run by himself through strange towns as Mick Jagger. He very much steered and was very much involved with the business side of the Rolling Stones. And he was from my vantage point, mind you, I'm not in the meetings, right? But from my vantage point, I was so impressed by him. And I felt like he was kind of the CEO of the Rolling Stones. Keith was the rock star, and it was the drugs, and it was and it was drinking. Oh, it was drinking and all that. But a lovely human, like really fun to be around. But yeah, that was what surprised me, was that Mick was, I didn't think he wouldn't be together, but I didn't realize to what degree Mick would be running the show and calling the shots and on top of it.
It sounds like a more humble version or peer to Gene Simmons, who's all about the business of music.
Yes, I believe I've never worked with Gene. I know their managers pretty well, and Gene sounds like a really interesting guy. But very much running the business and making decisions, and pretty unmalleable. He has his idea of how it will be, and that is how it is. And Mick was sort of the same. One of my, I don't want to pretend that at 21 years old, Mick and I were going to the pub together, but I did observe things, right? I was in their world and I observed things. And one of my favorite ones was we were shooting a music video for the Rockin' a Hard Place song, and it rained the first night, and they love the way it looks. So they brought rain machines in for the next 2 nights. We're in Foxborough Stadium. It's cold. It's either raining or fake raining the whole time. And the video director, I believe, might have been a producer, walks up to Mick and he's like, Mick, it needs to be like this. And Mick is staring off in the distance, and Mick doesn't even make eye contact with him. And he goes, no. And the guy's like emphatic. It needs to be like this for these reasons. We have to do this. And he's getting more animated, and Mick is not. And Mick is staring off in the distance, and he goes, no. And the guy really gets animated, and he's like, Mick, it's got to, for these reasons, or we're screwed, and da 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 da. And Mick, just as calmly, staring off in the distance, says, I might be an asshole, but I'm also Mick Jagger. And the guy goes, yes, you are. And he shrugs and walks away, and Mick is still staring off in the distance. And I came up with what I think Mick was thinking, which I think is really fun. I'm thinking Mick was thinking, sandwich. Maybe I'll have a sandwich, like I like it, with the crust cut off. Yeah, that sounds nice. Like, he was so unfazed by what this person was saying, because Mick had his version of how it was going to go. And that was not malleable in that moment, at least not by this person. So, and I don't want to, Mick is very much a rock star, but I admired him, and I thought he was really cool. And I hope I don't seem like I'm painting a bad picture of him. And again, I'll say, it's not like Mick and I were going to the pub, but I observed some things. I was there, and I feel really lucky to have been there and to just seen these things that are just fascinating. He was a guy who knew what he wanted, and seemed to be in charge of it. To me, the kid who was not invited to the meetings, but observed some things.
Mm-hmm. Well, what was the movie? Almost Famous. But then how long ago did that movie come out?
So that movie, interesting aside, one of our acts is Brad Paisley, and Brad is one of the guests in my book. And Brad Paisley's video director, Bailey Pryor, who works with us, he was the road manager for the band Stillwater that movie is modeled after. And he remembers the writer, Cameron Crowe, showing up as a kid and living all that. He was around for all of that happening. Bailey's an incredible human. He's out on the Brad Paisley tour for us right now. And Stillwater still gets together, like has lunch once in a while. Like, they're older gentlemen now. But, but a great movie, like really great. And based on true stories. Cameron used Stillwater as the opening act, because Stillwater was an opening act for like 3 years, but never broke it big. And so when Cameron wrote the script, he said, well, this is going to be an amalgam of 3 or 4 or 5 bands I visited, but let's use the name Stillwater because that's the one that never made it, but they were great guys and he liked them. Yeah, he bought the name from him. He said, hey guys, I want to make a movie and here's what I'm doing. And I'd really like to use your band name. And they were like, yeah, great.
When did the transition happen after that? You worked with Rolling Stones. You mentioned Brad Paisley, and funny story, to keep it short, 2012, I was recently injured, still had bandages on me. And I was invited to the White House for 4th of July picnic on the South Lawn. And Brad Paisley was a concert header for that. And we got sat right up in front. My ex-wife now, and I, and our little one, who was not even 2 years old. For some reason, she didn't want to cut his hair, had long hair. So, but we got to go backstage and meet Brad and all that. And Brad comes up and I'm blind and he goes, oh, what a cute baby. What is this name? Like, I told you we need to cut his hair. But her sign for like we're sitting, or her sign for me to like get up and go, was just tapping me on the arm, right?
Yeah.
And I would just stand up like, let's go. Where are we going? Well, we got sat right up in front row, and all of a sudden in the middle of the concert, she's tapping me on the arm really fast. So I stand up. As it turns out, Brad came right over to the right front stage, right in front of her, was like he was serenading her. So she was so excited. She was like tapping me on the arm, and I'm standing up like, what are you doing? Talking to singing to my wife. And she's like, why did you stand up? Because you told me to.
I would imagine Brad has an incredible memory. I wish I had the memory he did. So I will mention this to him next time I see him. I am actually, I have a music, I don't want to say career, let's call it a hobby, but I am Brad's opening act coming up here soon. We're really good friends, but also I'm opening for him June 11th in Ålesund, Norway, and June 13th in Hamar, Norway. So I will mention that to Brad.
That's
I'm
so
sure
cool.
he'll remember. He remembers everything. Gosh, I wish I had the memory he has.
Tell me about getting into singing. Were you always a singer?
Well, back to like my story in those 3 years, and I hardwired into myself that failing wasn't the end. It was actually a stepping stone. And I have deployed that mindset throughout the rest of my life and run down some pretty awesome things. And so, I own several companies, have a whole bunch of great employees, got into hockey at age 35. I've been all over the world, like 60 countries, do a bunch of public speaking. And as a kid, I was told I couldn't sing. And I was at a bar and I was at a house party in Norway and started singing along with the radio because it was 4 a.m. and I might have had just enough drinks that seemed like a great idea. And I finished singing and there was a band there and they said, you're joining us on stage tomorrow. And I said, no, I'm not. And they said, yeah, you are. And I went, yeah, I am. Again, because it was 4 a.m. So that seemed like maybe a good idea. And I woke up the next day and thought, oh my gosh, like I can't do this. Like I'm not a singer. What the hell? And, I show up, I get on stage, I sing a song. I think, it's polite applause at best. I hop off the stage. I run to the bar and I'm like, please give me all the drinks. I don't drink anymore, mind you, but I used to be quite good at it. And, the girl behind the bar hesitates and she goes, I have goosebumps. And I'm like, what? And then the band hops off stage after they finish their set and they're like, you're joining our band. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And they're like, yes, you are. I'm like, join a band in Norway. I live in America. You guys are Norwegian. And they're like, yep, that's what we're saying. And, I just there's a whole story behind why I make decisions like this. And if you want, I'll go into that next. If not, we can talk about something else. But I was like, yep. Okay, that sounds fun and it sounds scary and it sounds like I'm going to embarrass myself and I'm probably going to fail, but I love singing. So let's go ahead and give this a try. And I did that and started flying out for shows as a guest vocalist. And that has evolved. We got good and we got better and better. They were always good, but we got better and more popular. And the biggest festival in Norway asked us to be on the main stage. And we were so excited. Like this was a big deal gig. And 2 weeks later, they announced the headliner, which we would essentially be the opening act for. And it was Brad Paisley. And my heart sank because I had not told Brad or any of my friends in America that I'd been singing. And at this point, I've been for 4 years flying over there and singing and doing gigs. And telling Brad that I was his opening act was pretty wild. He didn't believe me. He made me sing for him. But I sang a little bit and he goes, oh my gosh, you are my opening act. But it was fun. It was terrifying, but it's evolved and I worked hard at it. I've done a ton of vocal lessons. And when I hang up with you, I'm going to a vocal lesson and I got better at it. I wasn't great. I was just good enough to get by with my first show. I thought afterwards the band was still on stage. I was just a guest. And I thought, that was really fun. I don't think I was that good, but if they asked me to do it again, I'm going to do it again. And they said, you should do that again. And I was like, okay. But I've worked at it to the point where now I have my own band and I tour Europe. I didn't do a big tour last year. I just did a few shows, but 2 years ago I did, I was Brad's opening act for a while, and I did Iceland and Switzerland and Germany and Denmark and Sweden and Norway and America. I mean, that's fun. Like, what a crazy thing. And all because I was willing to fail. I had conditioned myself to do the hard things and to know that I didn't have to be perfect and that failure wasn't death. And because I was not afraid to say yes to getting on stage at that bar the night after that party, I now find myself, in June 11th, I'll be on stage in front of 10,000 people singing songs I wrote. How fun is that? Like, that's just crazy, right? Like, how the hell does that happen? And the answer is find something you love and don't give up. That's it. Just keep going.
That's great. In fact, it's easier when you have this relative anonymity, right? You're in a foreign country, your friends don't know about it, but then all of a sudden, poof, the light gets turned on. And you get exposed to Brad, basically.
He was standing on the side of the stage. So when I first went out at that festival in Norway, I could see him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm like, I cannot look at him. I will stop singing if I look at him. And I looked out in the crowd. I mean, the openings, the music's playing, and I've got maybe 10 seconds before my first vocal. And right away, I look out in the crowd, and there's people I know from Nashville because they travel with Brad. And I'm like, oh, gosh. Yeah. But I also saw people I knew from Norway that had seen me sing before. And I was like, all right, here we go. And then out of the corner of my eye, I'm like, oh, God, there's Brad on the side of the stage and vocal. And it felt good to get that first note out. It was really hard right up until then. But as soon as I started singing, I was like, oh, yeah, you know how to sing. You can do this. This is fun. And from there on in, it got great. I still never looked at Brad. I was like, I can't look at him. But I looked at everybody else in the crowd and waved at them and had a great time.
I wanted to ask about the entrepreneurship. Like, when did you go from the hands-on to operating a business?
Yeah, to the white glove jerk who sits in his high chair and tells casts his decisions down to the masses. Let's see. No, I saw our industry was rapidly evolving. I was brand new to video, and fairly early on, within the first 4 years, I went to my boss and said, nobody really knows what to do creatively with video. They keep trying to treat it like it's the show when it's really just a part of the show. And I want your permission to buy about $50,000 worth of gear and moonlight as a kind of a creative director for our tours. And if I provide that service and I can make the clients happy with that, they'll be happier with us overall. And he said, I think you're inventing an industry. So not only am I going to give you permission, but I want to be your 50-50 partner in it. And so I just came out of a need and a want. Like, I saw there was a need and I wanted to be creative. And I thought I could be the guy that does this. And I really do think we were the first ever company to do that. No one in all these years of saying it has said that someone came before us. So I do think we pioneered the industry of content creation for screens. There were people doing it, but they weren't people that did it for a living. Like, somebody's music video director would get the call like, hey, man, put some stuff up on our screens. We were the first company to go, this is important and we're going to focus on this and try and do it well. And that was really, that was probably going to be it. And that company, would be what exists today. And it's got, a few employees. It grows and breathes. But what really happened was my partner in it, who was my boss. I ran his Nashville office, and he was like a father to me. We were really close. And I built the Nashville office. I ran the Nashville office. And my partner and friend and boss was killed in a carjacking. And when he died, Bailey Pryor, that same employee, we have a lot of them. I'll keep talking about just the one. Bailey came to me and said, I think that you should start a company like Lee's, the bigger company that provided all the hardware and all the stuff to do the shows. And he said, a bunch of us want to come work for you. The clients said they would want to work with you. And I don't know how you'd do it, but I think it would keep some part of Lee alive. And that last little bit really got me. And so I decided to do a big hardware company, which for your listeners who don't know, when you go to a concert and see screens and cameras and video that are part of the show that they tour with, my company provides that. We've been voted best in the industry more years than not over the past 15 years. I think we've won 12 of the past 15 years, something like that. I think they just had the award show and we didn't win this year. We won the year before. So I think it's now 12 out of 16, but still pretty good odds. And, and so we do that. Like this weekend, I'll be visiting Luke Combs, and we have all the video equipment at Luke Combs Stadium show. And we have about 35 tours that are out. So that's what we do. But the reason I got into that, I didn't have an entrepreneurial drive. I started a creative company because I saw a need and it bothered me that it wasn't being filled. And I loved scratching that creative itch. I started the hardware company because my friend who was doing it died, and I felt like I could keep some part of him alive, which is a terrible reason to start a company. But it is what I did. The first major hurdle we ran into as a company, besides getting out of the gate, which was insane, it was about as dumb as moving into my car and following you two around the way I did it. So there's a pattern here of kind of craziness. But we made it through that. But 4 years in, I woke up one day and I hadn't slept in 4 years. I was so exhausted. And I woke up one day and said, I haven't slept in 4 years and Lee is still gone. What the hell am I doing? And I had kind of a meltdown for like 2 months. I showed up at work. I don't think anyone really knew, but inside I was not okay. And I worked it out. And in those 2 months, I thought, I do love our employees. I love our clients, and I'm really proud of what we're doing. And so I just had to reimagine and reassert what my why was. And so my why was no longer to keep Lee alive. Now it was because this is what we're doing is cool. And I love the people we do it with. So let's keep doing it.
That's great. I have so many more questions about that, but I want to ask why the book? Why now?
Why the book? A friend of mine. So I found out the first year we won Video Company of the Year at, it's the Polestar Awards. There's an industry magazine, Polestar. We're in Los Angeles. I get up on stage. I do a quick acceptance speech. I'm stunned we won, by the way. I walk off stage and I fall against the wall. I thought I was having a stroke. I had stopped breathing because I was having an anxiety attack because I was afraid of public speaking. News to me. And I was fine a few minutes later, but I don't like being afraid of things. So I went right away and asked 2 different colleges locally if I could speak. And speaking at the second one, a girl up front started crying. And it turns out that she had quit school that day. And listening to me talk, this was like the last thing she was going to do in college. She had told everyone goodbye. And this was the last thing she was going to do in college, was sitting in that chair. And listening to me, she decided that if I could keep going through what I'd been through, that she could too. And she decided that she was not quitting. In the moment she had that revelation, she started crying and couldn't stop crying. And she apologized profusely. And I'm like, no, this is great. And seeing how powerful that was, I wanted to get better at public speaking. So Cameron Harold, who's one of the entrepreneurs in my book, as a guest writer, who did 1-800-GOT-JUNK. He's built a few companies, a really impressive guy. I knew he was a great speaker, and we had a mutual friend. I went and met him in Phoenix. I flew to his house to have an hour lunch with him. I flew and ended up hitting it off with him and ended up heading back to his house. And he and his wife his wife at the time, sat on the porch and cracked open a bottle of wine. And at the end of it, he said, "You need to write books. You're really a storyteller." And I was like, I never thought about that. Well, the next day his publisher called me and said, "So I hear we're writing books together." And I was like, no. But I started thinking about it and I thought, I don't have anything to say. Why would I write a book? And I ran through some permutations just as a thought exercise. And I thought, well, actually, if I were to write a book, it would be on how not giving up is what has made the difference in my life. Being tenacious has been the force in my life. And I'd want people to understand that it's not something you're born with, because I wasn't. and that it's something you can learn. It's a muscle you can build. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, God, all my artists who all have these incredible talents, when you ask them why they made it, none of them will talk about their photographic memory, their pitch perfect hearing, their ability to build muscle, their balance, their all of these people that are famous that I know. When you ask them why they made it, they all say, oh, it's because I didn't give up. And they'll all tell you they knew someone more talented than they were, who you've never heard of, because they fell to anonymity because they did give up. And I thought, that's really something worth sharing. And then I was like, well, crap, now I got to write a book. And that's how it started. I was like, called the publisher and we got underway, and actually traded up to a bigger publisher later. And I'm really pleased that Forefront and Simon & Schuster, and like, it's got major distribution. And so really grateful. But to answer your question, that's kind of the how. The why is because I feel like it's our job to live the best life we can, and then to share with others what we have learned. That's the number two. The number two is to live the very best life we can, most fulfilling, most interesting, might even be a better way to put it, because it doesn't need to be all roses. It just needs to be interesting and, man, a life worth living, a life really lived. And then number two is share what you can, because some people have shared with you and have helped you along the way. So it just feels right to do that. I'd be ashamed if I didn't. And that's the why.
I love that. And it sounds incredible. I've really enjoyed Cameron Herold's books. I think he's got another one coming out. But
he does. And Cam's a great guy, and Tenacity's his thing. I was trying to get Branson in the book. There were a few guests that I didn't get. Dolly Parton I didn't get. And I won't name some of the others, but she's queen of the world. She gives you the rejection letter that makes you feel so good about yourself that you're just in clouds for the next week. Cause Dolly, I can't believe how nice Dolly was when she told me no, right? She's just the queen. And I've worked with her a bunch. She's awesome. But
that's terrific.
To get Branson, they said, come on out to the island. If you stay here like through 2 weekends and the week in between, we'll find a time. And I was at a point in my life where I didn't want to spend 10 days on the island. And I was like, ugh. And then I thought, honestly, as much as I admire Richard and he's one of my heroes, Cameron's the tenacity guy. Like, Cameron just keys right in on tenacity as being the thing. And I was like, yeah, we'll just do Cameron. And I asked Cameron and he's like, hell yeah. Tenacity, that's my thing. Yeah. I'm like, yes, it is.
Tenacity builds up that momentum, the inertia. And the more you work at it, the easier it is to continue, and the harder it is to stop or slow down. So it sounds exactly like your life. You put a lot of effort into getting going, but now, throughout your life, your career.
Now it would be effort to stop. When something scares me now, I run right towards it. I'm like, ooh, that sounds fun.
And you've even climbed Everest?
No, I haven't done that.
No,
I have asthma, and I don't think I would. And I've never wanted to be that in shape. But I've been to Antarctica and did an expedition down there. I've been to 7 continents. I've no desire to do Everest because I think I might not make it, and I'm having too much fun. Right. So
awesome. Well, there's somebody out there that is afraid of trying, and maybe holding himself back, negative self-talk. What would you say to that person?
Well, there's everybody out there who's afraid of trying, and I'm one of them. But I have learned that it is more fun to try than to let the fear win. And it is better to do that. So what I would say is, if you're really afraid of trying, you should be a little afraid of anything, right? There's a little bit of fear in everything we do. But if your fear isn't overcoming, if you aren't overcoming your fear, ask yourself, do you really want to do what you, is this really a dream for you? Because being an electrical engineer was not a dream for me. It's what I thought I ought to do. And what really helped me was having a dream. So find something you really want to do And don't be afraid to do that would be my first thing. But the second thing is, no matter where you're at, just take the littlest step towards it. And the moment you do, you'll stop being the person frozen, who's ashamed, who's thinking, I could, I should, I oughta. And you start being the person who is. So find something you love and then take even the littlest step towards it. And then just keep moving. And then I guess lastly, he didn't ask for 3. I would say just make a friend of failure. Like, it's just okay to fail. You don't try and fail. You try really hard not to. But if it's going to happen, it's like, woo, brush the dirt off. What did I learn? And be proud of the fact that you are hanging out there. I mean, if you aren't failing, your dream probably isn't big enough.
Or drive across country, sneak under a fence, and take a union job for free. You could jump right in.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great place to segue into our final segment, the countdown to impact. This is where I ask each guest for 3 books, 2 quotes, and 1 person who've all made an impact in their life. 3 books.
So I kind of knew this was coming, but I didn't have time to prepare. So here's what I got. I like Michael Pollan's documentaries. And I read How to Change Your Mind is how I got introduced to him. Because as you'll read in the book, I have some PTSD and I opted to do psychedelic therapy to get through it. And that's a whole chapter on the book on just looking in the mirror and getting better. And that How to Change Your Mind book was huge for me. I might name that one, but the one I just read, I don't even know if I'm recommending it, but I'll just say what I think. He just wrote a book on consciousness, and it's called A World Appears. And the idea is, like, why is it when we wake up in the morning and open our eyes, a world appears? Why are we alive? Why are we us? Why are we here? What is consciousness? And it made me question so many things about being Scott moment to moment that I don't know that I enjoyed it, but it made me think, it made me cringe, it made me smile. And I think that's worth experiencing if that's interesting at all to you. It's a little heady, but I really respect the author and I really, really enjoyed the book.
Excellent.
If you're a businessman, the E-Myth changed my life. Yeah, especially if you have a startup company and you're the founder. The E-Myth, the shorthand for that is the entrepreneurial myth, is that because you're awesome at doing something, you'd be great at running a business in it. So I think one of the examples even they use in the book is you're great at making donuts. So you open a donut shop, and the skill of making donuts is not the skill that's required to have a successful donut shop. Mm-hmm. And what that book taught me embarrassingly late in my entrepreneurial journey, 7 years in, is that I had to let go and start delegating. And instead of working in the business, I had to step back and work on the business. I had to put people in place that love to implement systems, which I hate. I had to delegate. I had to have a hierarchy. I had to put just a whole thing in place. And that book changed my entrepreneurial life. And I am so grateful for that book.
I totally agree.
That's 2.
Was that two books?
It's 3. Let's do both of Michael Pollan's. How to Change Your Mind, because you are the most important part of your journey. And it's an amazing book only if you have trauma. So that means only if you're a human being. So if you're not human, don't read it. But if you're a human being, you've got some trauma, and it's an incredible, psychedelics are an unbelievable tool. One I was terrified of and just tiptoed into, more afraid of anything I've ever been afraid of in my life. And that's saying something. And they changed my life. And I'm so grateful for that therapy and how it let me see myself and the world we live in and the people around me. So there's my 3. Two quotes. Richard Branson We were just talking about him. If your dreams don't scare you, you have the wrong dreams. That's huge for me. That's huge for me. I'm going to do something so vain that I'm smiling and laughing at myself over it. I'm going to quote me. I met Tim Ferriss years ago, hung out with him at a thing, and we had a good time. He was really an interesting guy. And I asked him if he really did all the things that he said he did in the 4-Hour Work Week. Let's make that one of my 3 books, the 4-Hour Work Week. It did change my life. So I got 4, maybe. I cheated. And he said that he did do all the things, but he did a bunch of them because he knew he was writing a book and running an experiment. And I was like, oh, that's a good answer. And I sat straight up in bed the next morning and went, oh my gosh, my friend Tim did not have a life worth writing about and then write about it. Although arguably Tim did. My friend Tim started writing and then he had a life worth writing about. I'm going to start living my life like I'm writing a book, and I'm going to ask myself what would make the next chapter more interesting. And if it won't totally blow my life up, I'm going to do it. And I have lived by that for the better part of 20 years, including starting to play hockey at age 35, which incredible things came from that. Doing public speaking, incredible things have come from that. Being a singer in a band in Norway, which now I'm my own artist and touring the world, right? If it doesn't blow my life up, I'm going to do it. So the quote I would say, this is so awful and so vain, but it's me. I would encourage you to, quote, live your life like you're writing a book. Make the next chapter amazing. There. How vain is that?
That's terrific. I'm going to steal that myself.
Do it.
Now, okay, and one person.
My mom. My mom is a guest in the book. 17 guests, people like Garth Brooks, Alan Jackson, and 2 astronauts. But my mom was a single parent. She was an executive. She was a vice president of a company starting in the 60s, which was unheard of. She stepped up into that role. She dealt with a lot of things. Women weren't paid much. She only had a 2-year degree. Everyone else in the company had doctorates. We grew up really poor. We didn't have enough money to pay for heat sometimes. My dad and she got a divorce, which was a good thing that needed to happen. And that bore its own judgment. Our church told us that we were going to hell at 6 years old. I was told that. And through it all, that what you would call hardship, I grew up feeling incredibly loved, incredibly supported, and just she was just a perfect mom for me. Meanwhile, the company, the owner of the company retired. His son took over. His son stepped in with my mom and said, you're the only reason there's still a company here. Like, my dad's brilliant and he's an inventor and he's all these great things. And he is. Hugo's a great man. But my mom was running the business and they didn't really understand how important that was. The son had a business degree. He said, I'm giving you 10% of the company and I'm quadrupling your pay to something reasonable for a vice president. And so she was holding the company together and she was holding me together in such a way that all of the employees loved her and loved working there. And I loved my life and loved that she was my mom. And she carried all that with a strength and a grace, and that she is my hero, and she always will be.
That's wonderful. All right, final 2 questions. One, where can people go to find out more, connect?
Tenaciousbook.com. Right. So Tenacious Book, I bought the URL, tenaciousbook.com. There's a website for the book that's got some supporting material in it also. I'm Scott Scovill with no E on Scovill. So scottscovill.com. On social media, I'm, at Scott Scovill Creative. Scott Scoville's mine also, but it's more personal. So at Scott Scovill Creative, LinkedIn and all that. LinkedIn is Scott Scovill. So those places. TenaciousBook.com is a great place to start. The book is available everywhere. Just search Tenacious Book or Tenacious and my name, and you'll find it. And I would love for people to pick up a copy. I poured a lot of myself into it.
Well, we'll get that into, as they say, the show notes. And the final question is, what is your definition of living a life of impact?
I think a life of impact, some of my favorite people, when they walk into a room, they light up a room. And when you talk to them and they walk away, you feel better about yourself. One of my guests in the book is so like that, Scott Hamilton. He's my chapter 1 guest. An NHL star named Terry Crisp. I think that a life of impact is one where, in their extreme example, anytime you spend with this person, you just feel better about yourself. But to a lesser degree, if you can just make people feel better about themselves when you're around them, or have an impact on them, or they read your book, or they hear or watch some art you've created. If you can make the world a little bit better place and make people feel a little better about themselves, that's a life of impact.
That's terrific. I've forgotten about that connection. I used to live on Scott Hamilton Street in Bowling Green, where he went.
Oh, really?
I'm
going to see Scott tonight. He's having an event. He and John Oates from Hall & Oates, who I also know. They're clients. They're having some event tonight. I'm not totally sure what it is, but if it's Scott and John, it sounds fun. So my lady and I are headed down to see Scott here in a little bit, right after my vocal lesson.
It's so funny. And I love that. I really enjoyed this conversation. I wish we could extend it. There's so many parts about this. For example, I caught the Ferris story from another interview you did, and I actually was influenced quite a bit by the 4-hour work week, and to the point where we once hired somebody from India, from Brickwork, to do our social media for the fudge e-commerce shop we had. And who would have known, foreseen that somebody from India didn't really know that fudge is not a breakfast food. So it could have been irony, but to say this is your favorite, your favorite breakfast, treat is fudge. Anyhow, that was from his suggestion. Anyhow, I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you for taking the time and sharing just an incredible story. We'll get all the links into the show notes, and I wish you all the best. More success in the future.
It was a pleasure spending time with you and your listeners, and everybody have a great rest of the day.